Hello, my name is Kenton and I would like to welcome you to this lecture examining dietary manipulation to reduce greenhouse gases. There are many potential methane mitigation strategies to reduce enteric methane production from ruminants, and during this lecture I will cover the strategies which are receiving the most attention in relation to their efficacy in reducing methane. Whilst working through these strategies, I will point out their applicability to grazing scenarios and consider other less high-profile strategies for reducing grazing emissions. There is less interest in reducing methane emissions from hindgut fermenters like the horse, as this is considered to contribute less to the global total, but this may be of more importance moving forwards towards a net zero approach targeted for 2050. It must also be remembered that methane can be emitted from faeces, but this is not considered within this lecture. So let's start by examining the importance of methane. Methane is an energy-rich hydrocarbon, yielding 55 megajoules per kilogram when burnt. Within the scientific literature, there is a range of between 2 and 12% of energy lost as methane or gas, which does not contribute to the animal production. This primarily leads to the economic loss of ingested gross energy as methane, since the gas does not contribute to the performance of the animal. This range of 2 to 12% is diet dependent, and there is a predisposition of high forage diets to be more acetate style fermentation, which yields a higher methane, compared to a cereal or concentrate based ration, which tends to be more propionate based fermentation. The key focus on methane is now in relation to its effect on environment and global warming. Ruminants have always produced methane, but the concentration of numbers to support human nutrition has resulted in them being targeted for ambitious cuts. Methane from enteric fermentation has a 100-year global warming potential of 27.2 compared to carbon dioxide, which has a value of 1. Methane is a more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, as its structure helps trap heat reflecting from the Earth's surface, not allowing it to exit the atmosphere, thus increasing the global temperature. These global warming potential values can be misleading. The half-life, or time taken for half of the gas to disappear from the atmosphere, is also important. The half-life of carbon dioxide is 100 years, whereas methane is only 9 years. So, if atmospheric concentration of methane is approximately 1900 parts per billion now, and no more methane were emitted, in 9 years' time this value would be 850 parts per billion, and in a further 9 year time approximately 425 parts per billion, or a 25% of today's value. So putting all this into context, over 20 years methane has a global warming potential of 85, not 27.2. The key take-home message from this is that methane is a problem, and globally we need to reduce levels in order to minimise future global temperature rise. The reason behind biogenic methane production is that under anaerobic or oxygen-free conditions, the electron receiver NAD+ needs to be reduced from the NADH stage, and this reduction or removal of hydrogen which feeds into the methane production. This image represents an overview of methane production within the ruminant. As mentioned in previous lectures, approximately 95% of methane is erupted or belched out, and 5% leaves as flatulence. Cattle produce approximately 30 litres of methane per kilogram dry matter intake, and this is related to diet type and their microbiome. The methanogens are the microbes responsible for the methane production, whereas the other microbes are responsible for volatile fatty acid production, which are precursors to productivity in the form of meat or milk. We will now have a look in depth at methane production. Previously, we have looked at the overview of ruminant carbohydrate fermentation from the point of all carbohydrates, but here we'll be looking from glucose as the starting point. The production of acetate releases hydrogen, whereas the production of propionate, butyrate, lactate, succinate and ethanol, marked with an asterisk, consume hydrogen. Pyruvate is central to this process, and the resultant pathway is based upon rumen conditions, microbial populations and diet. The overall equation for methane production within the anaerobic fermentation is carbon dioxide plus 4-dihydrogen in the presence of methanogenic archaea results in methane and 2 molecules of water. The metabolic pathway for methane production is referred to as the Wolff cycle and is specific to hydrogen-trophic methanogenic archaea. More simply put, the hydrogen-consuming methane-producing microbes. Within the cycle, 2 steps have been highlighted here. Firstly, the 6th step, or VI, which is a coalbumin or vitamin B12 dependent step, highlighted in cream. And secondly, the 7th, or VII, step, which utilises cofactor F430 This is the point at which methane is finally produced, and this is highlighted in light blue. At present, the relevance of these two highlighted steps may be unclear, but as we move through dietary mitigation strategies, I hope this will make more sense. This graphic represents the most promising global methane abatement strategies for dietary manipulation. My aim is to go through the most practical and permissible strategies within the UK-EU setting. If you are interested in the other strategies, then please have a look on Google Scholar for readings. I will cover the use of oil, macroalgae, nitrate and 3-NOP in more detail, along with a little on tannins, which are a phytochemical. The use of ionophores is not permitted within the UK or EU at present, as they are in essence an antibiotic with targets, and also with targets to reduce antimicrobial resistance. Their use has been banned since 2003. Defaunation, or the removal of protozoa, is difficult to achieve on a practical scale. It is possible under controlled conditions at research institutes, but all it takes is contact with one faunated animal for protozoal establishment to occur. Phytochemicals are secondary plant metabolites which have a role in plant defence, and they're a diverse group of chemicals. And one of the largest issues with these is the form and activity. As plants are stressed, more secondary metabolites are produced, but the levels are variable. So to ensure a continuity of supply and maintain an active level is very difficult. Oils have been one of the most tried and tested dietary additives, as they are easy to handle and incorporate into feeds. Oils, which are liquid at room temperature in comparison to fats, which are solid at room temperature, tend to contain unsaturated bonds. This is where there is a double bond between carbon atoms, which has displaced two hydrogens. The proportion of unsaturated bonds depends on the type and source of oil. Some oils, such as fish oil, are rich in DHA and EPA, whereas linseed or flaxseed oil is rich in linolenic and linoleic acid. Conjugated linoleic acid, or CLA, is found in meat and dairy products, but there is also CLA found within grass. Oils do have to be used with some level of care. From a body of evidence, it is suggested that 6% oil on a dry matter intake basis is the optimal level for inclusion. Otherwise, the following negative effects may be noticed. Decreased feed intake due to lower rumen turnover. This is driven by a reduction in fibre digestion. Oils tend to coat larger particles within rumen, including protozoa, which can decrease the number of methanogens given the close association with protozoa. If the rumen and feed efficiency are reduced, then animal performance can also be reduced, and a high level of oils would also have a laxative effect. Oils supply extra energy to the diet and can be utilised by the host within the abomasum or small intestines. Fats and oils are added to some diets to increase the overall ME of a diet. So why do oils reduce methane? It is this combination of acting as an alternative hydrogen sink through saturation of the double bonds and to produce saturated fatty acids such as C18, octadecanoic acid or simply stearic acid from their unsaturated precursors such as linolenic, linoleic or CLA. Addition of oils can reduce emissions by up to 20% compared to unsupplemented controls. One of the largest advantages of oils is the ability to use in combination with other strategies, which these effects can be additive. Plant breeding programs focusing on increasing levels of oil within grasses to increase energy supply will, but as a consequence of methane reduction, are actually in progress. Macroalgae has received a lot of attention over the past few years, given the extent of methane reduction seen in vitro or in the laboratory setting. Within the UK, supermarkets have been investing into research for methane reduction by evaluating macroalgae as a dietary supplement. Macroalgae refers to algae that are visible to the eye compared to microalgae which are not visible to the eye. However, colour changes may be observed in cultures of microalgae. To put it in practical terms, macroalgae are the seaweeds you would notice when walking along the beach or swimming in the ocean. There are three types of algae: red or rhodophyta, which are found in deep, warmer waters; green or chlorophyta, which are found in shallow waters and include many non-marine species; and brown or phaeophyci, which are found just off the coast in colder seas in the northern hemisphere and would be mostly what you would see washed up on shore in the UK or Europe. These include kelps. The graphic at the top of the screen represents typical structures of the three types of macroalgae. Within these macroalgae, there are numerous secondary plant metabolites, but bromoform, or CHBr3, is a potent antimathogenic compound. It has been identified that bromoform inhibits methane under step 6 of the Wolff cycle by suppressing the cobalt-containing vitamin B12. There are also elevated levels of eicosapentaenoic acid, EPA, and docosahexaenoic acid, or DHA, which are also unsaturated oils. The levels of these secondary metabolites are variable and dependent upon growing conditions, so differences in sea temperature, marine life and weather can all affect these levels without having a more consistent product. Seaweeds also contain iodine that can be beneficial, but this needs to be taken into account within the whole dietary context. The in vitro and in vivo results from red algae seem to be greater than that of the brown algae, but you must remember that red algae grows deeper and in more tropical locations, so developing a low-carbon method of harvest, processing and transport is required, otherwise net emissions will be lower for cattle, but gross emissions of carbon dioxide equivalents might increase. The range of methane reductions seen in vivo is between 30 and 70% compared to unsupplemented controls. More work is needed in this area to ascertain the potential effect of local harvestable algae in the UK or European production systems. We will now look at dietary nitrate and methane reduction. This has been considered as a very practical and easy to implement solution, but there are some risks which I will highlight. The work has focused on feed-grade calcium nitrate, which is an alternative form of a fertiliser. The chemical structure of calcium nitrate can be seen at the top of the screen. Nitrate acts as an alternative hydrogen sink in much the same way as unsaturated oils, but there is a key difference. The energetics of this reaction are defined through Gibbs free energy, indicate the spontaneity of the reaction, with larger negative values being more spontaneous compared to smaller negative values. Here we can see that the reduction of nitrate to nitrite has a Gibbs free energy of minus 130, and the reduction of nitrite to ammonium has a Gibbs free energy of minus 371. If we compare these values to the Gibbs free energy of minus 67 for the reduction of carbon dioxide to methane, you can see the most favourable pathway is nitrate to ammonium compared to the product ion of methane. And that intense science will look at a more practical way. For every 1% dietary nitrate on a dry matter basis within a ruminant's diet, there is a 10% reduction in methane. But this effect has been found to be additive. So why couldn't you just add 100% or 10% nitrate to the diet to achieve a 100% reduction in methane? We can't. We also have to consider the effects of nitrate on the host and not just the ruminant environment. There are known safety issues when including nitrate at above 2% of nitrate on a dry matter basis. Hemoglobin is used to carry oxygen around the body cells from the lungs and then return carbon dioxide to the lungs to be replaced with oxygen. Hemoglobin is in a normal oxidation state of iron 2+ and has a high affinity for oxygen. Excess nitrite, which passes through the rumen wall and into the bloodstream, reacts with the iron Fe2+ ion and converts it to methemoglobin, which is Fe3+ ion, which has less ability to carry oxygen. So the blood turns bluer in colour and oxygen starvation can occur, leading eventually to death. The use of nitrate as a feed material to reduce methane has been patented by Cargill, and a commercial product, Silvair, is available. It is worth noting that calcium nitrate is considered by the UK or EU authorities as a feed material and not a feed additive, so its use needs to be carefully formulated by nutritionists to avoid serious health implications. We will now look at the effect of 3-nitrooxypropanol, or more simply 3-NOP. This has received worldwide attention given to the ability to reduce methane at a low feed rate. The structure of 3-NOP can be seen at the top of the screen. At first it seems to be a simple molecule, but this relates to its function. 3-NOP has a similar molecular shape to methyl coenzyme Z, which is a coenzyme in the Wolff cycle. 3-NOP blocks the functional site as indicated here, so no methane can produce, and the excess hydrogen can be utilised by other metabolic processes which are normally less favourable based on Gibbs free energy. Data shows that approximately 1.5 grams of 3-NOP reduces methane emissions by 30% for dairy cows and 40% for beef cattle. Another advantage of 3-NOP is that it can be used with other strategies to further reduce methane. Free NOP or Bovair is an EFSA registered feed additive marketed by DSM, and its inclusion level varies upon different classes of ruminant livestock. We will now have a break from the science and look at the applicability of dietary mitigation strategies to production systems. This graphic was taken from Arndt et al. 2022 and examines practical feeding strategies to reduce methane in both housed and grazed ruminants from published in vivo studies. The three strategies identified were increased feeding level, decreased grass maturity or increasing the nutritive quality by feeding younger, lusher forage, and thirdly, decreasing the forage to concentrate ratio by increasing the proportion of concentrate within the diet. The first two are applicable to grazing scenarios, and the third could be introduced if dairy cows are offered a concentrate-rich buffer feed post-milking, but this is not a normal management strategy, so was not considered by the authors. The potential emissions reductions on the upper line are the effects per litre of milk, and on the lower line are the effects per kilogram of gain. The second graphic looks at the relevant effect of a product-based reduction in relation to relative effect on intake, digestibility, milk and gain. In essence, it is the key to increase intake or digestibility to increase productivity. The authors also highlighted taniferous foragers. These contain tannins and have also had an effect in protein protection within the rumen. Taniferous foragers again have varying levels of active secondary metabolites, making uniform supply from grazing difficult, but in a mixed species sward they may be beneficial. Condensed tannins can affect dry matter intake at higher levels and therefore reduce performance. If you're interested, then please look at some of the published literature. High sugar grasses have been looked at as a way to reduce methane emissions, but the results are less consistent and may be a reflection of forage management. IBAs, in association with germinal, breed high water-soluble carbohydrate grasses. These ryegrass cultivars can contain between 250 and 300 grams per kilogram of dry matter of soluble sugars. When ingested by the ruminant, these soluble sugars are almost instantly available to microbial populations as an energy source for microbial growth. The theory is that having a larger amount of soluble carbohydrates reduces the proportion of acetate and increases the proportion of propionate. This is very difficult to prove in commercial conditions. Increasing the level of soluble carbohydrates has an inverse correlation with crude protein and neutral detergent fibre. This again may reflect rumen fermentation with a greater nitrogen capture efficiency and a lower proportion of fibre to ferment to acetate. From limited in vivo studies, it has been shown that for every 10 gram increase in water-soluble carbohydrates per kilogram dry matter, there is approximately a half litre reduction in methane per kilogram dry matter intake. The key to ongoing performance enhancement and methane reduction is grassland management to ensure that grass is maintained at high soluble carbohydrate levels based on regrowth, stocking regime. Let us now look at methane in context of the UK greenhouse gas emissions. Every year, the Department for Farming and Rural Affairs, DEFRA, and the National Statistics Office, the NSO, compile a total of livestock numbers in June and December. Since horses are not classified as livestock within the UK, data is assessed using the British Equestrian Trade Association, or BETA. The current data set for horses was released in 2019, although an update has been recently published. The numbers of cattle do not vary dramatically between December and June, so only the December figure is presented. There is a massive shift in sheep numbers, with almost 11 million lambs being slaughtered between June and December. The main point of this table is to look at the emissions based on animal species, and there are different emission factors based on species and life stage within cattle. In December 2022, there were approximately 9.5 million cattle, 24.5 million sheep and 847,000 horses. So let's have a look at the Tier 1 emissions factor. Here I've included the Tier 1 figures for methane production. A Tier 1 approach is simply multiplying the animal numbers by a factor, whereas Tier 2 and Tier 3 approaches are more complex relating to intake and performance. The Tier 1 numbers also change by region, so these numbers are specific to Western Europe and are based on the 2019 figures and not the original 2006 figures. The values used here are 52 kilograms per year for each beef cow, 126 kilograms of methane per year for each dairy cow, 52 kilograms of methane per year for each breeding in cow and male beast, and 9 kilograms per year per sheep, and 18 kilograms of methane per year for horse. You might say this is an oversimplification, as you cannot compare a cow yielding 20 litres per day at grass to one yielding 50 litres per day on a total mixed ration, but this is why Tier 2 and 3 approaches are preferred for cattle, given the larger variation. However, Tier 1 is the basic level all countries use to estimate their emissions. Here we have the estimated total methane production per classification animal. Approximately 760 million kilograms of methane are produced from ruminant livestock per year, and only 15 million kilograms from horses. If we have a look at the relative contribution of agricultural methane across sectors, we can see that methane represents the largest proportion of greenhouse gases in relation to agriculture. That is why there is so much attention drawn to livestock emissions. Policymakers don't like targeting areas that adversely affect people in terms of social or economic situations. UK agriculture is getting better relative to 1990, or the baseline. There has been around a 17% drop in total greenhouse gas emissions, as indicated by the upper line on this graph. And this is supported by a 7% reduction in agricultural methane emissions over the same time frame, and again indicated by the upper line of this lower graph. You must look at the state of the UK livestock ruminant industry as a whole, but there are also now fewer animals now than compared to 1990. Indicating that we've got better genetics and better nutrition since then. Finally, to end on a slightly more positive note, phage are being studied to see if they can be utilised to eliminate methanogenic archaea. The challenge is to identify phage that naturally infect methanogens, or will be able to, or will be possible to control the genetic material injected. If successful, this could almost eliminate enteric methane production, so long as all animals were exposed to the phage.